What's going on, guys? It's Greg here, and just wanted to do a quick video about how you could survive World War III if it were to happen. Obviously, there's been a lot of talk about World War III today after the top Iranian general Soleimani was killed in a drone strike by the U.S. military. And I wanted to just do a very quick video on the basic items you need to survive World War III, especially if we're talking about a nuclear war. Now, I've done videos on my channel about surviving a nuclear war and nuclear survival skills. Contrary to popular belief, you can survive a nuclear war. There's a lot of people on my channel that I've read comments, and people say that you can't survive World War III. It's impossible to survive a nuclear war, and that's actually not true. Actually, depending on how bad the war is, how bad the nuclear war is, and how many bombs are exchanged, you can actually survive it. And the reason why is that most of the damage from a nuclear bomb is concentrated in a small area. It's concentrated in a small, maybe maximum 5 to 10 mile area. That's the blast radius. So a nuclear weapon, when it's detonated, it has four main characteristics that occur, and four main ways that it causes damage. The first one is the blast pressure. So that's the actual blast, which causes an overpressure around the surrounding area, which can destroy buildings. It can, kill people. The next one is thermal radiation, which is basically heat. So you have your blast, which blows things up like dynamite. That's the first way. And the second way is thermal radiation, so heat. A nuclear weapon will generate thousands of degrees in temperature, which will melt pretty much everything: steel, concrete, cars. Everything will catch on fire if you're close to the actual detonation point where the bomb is detonated. Because nuclear weapons can generate the same heat as the sun. Because it's the same type of energy involved in a nuclear weapon as there is the fission and fusion reactions on the sun. So a nuclear weapon is capable of generating the same temperature as the surface of the sun. So it'll melt pretty much everything if you're close enough to the detonation point. And as you go further out from the detonation point, you're still vulnerable to burning your eyes if you look at the flash of the light. So you have to make sure you never look at the light. But you can get third-degree burns as far away as a few hundred kilometers, depending on the size of the weapon. So you need to worry about the blast, the heat. Then there's also the radiation aspects, the fallout. And all fallout is just the ash from the explosion. So if you look at a volcano, when a volcano explodes, you see all the ash that goes up in the air. The same thing happens after a nuclear bomb is exploded. Everything is vaporized and it goes up into the air, and those are ashes that are radiated by the radiation. And eventually those ashes will land somewhere, depending on how strong the wind is. The wind will blow those ashes, and the ashes will be deposited downwind of the explosion point, or where it was detonated. So that's the third thing to worry about is the nuclear fallout. And the final thing is the EMP, which a lot of people don't think about, but the EMP is electromagnetic pulse, which basically wipes out electricity and electronics. For it could be up to couple hundred kilometers. It can wipe out the electricity. So those are the four main things that a nuclear weapon can create. Your blast, your heat, electromagnetic pulse, and fallout radiation, and radiation in general. And then aside from nuclear weapons, if we're talking about World War III, you can be looking at biological and chemical weapons, which are so numerous and so vast. It's hard for me to do this all in one video. Um, But when it comes to biological weapons, there's different types. You have weapons that are designed to target food supplies, which will kill off livestock and poison water systems. And then you have weapons designed for attacking people. And those could either be contagious or not contagious. So, like a non-contagious bioweapon would be like anthrax. Anthrax is extremely dangerous if you touch it or inhale it. But it's not contagious at all. It's infectious, but it's not contagious. So that can be used to, let's say, have extremely lethal effects on a specific group of people or a specific area versus, contagious weapons like smallpox or Ebola. They can be used to just cause chaos across a whole country. And then you have chemical weapons, which can be persistent or non-persistent. Persistent chemical weapons have some type of a glue that sticks onto things in the environment, and that makes them last a lot longer, and they're more lethal. And then you have non-persistent weapons, which are usually they may be sprayed, by aircraft, or they're exploded out of a shell, and that causes, an immediate effect, but it doesn't persist for a long time. And the common denominator with all these things is you need to protect your body and you need to shelter, especially if we're talking about nuclear radiation. One of the things that I highly recommend that everybody gets, is a simple, Israeli gas mask. This is an Israeli civilian gas mask, and comes with this filter here. This filter is a NATO. This fits all NATO filters, all NATO masks, and this, you could buy this for like $40 on Amazon, and it comes with a filter. So this is really a no-brainer. So this is what the company is Shalon, Shalon, and they manufacture these for the Israeli government, and the Israeli government gives these to civilians, just in case there's a chemical, biological, or nuclear or radiological situation over there. They give these to civilians, so this way civilians have some protection in the case of some type of a CBRN situation. CBRN is chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear. So you can buy yourself one of these masks for $40 on Amazon.com, and this will filter for 8 hours under normal breathing situations. If you're not engaged in heavy physical activity, then this will last for 8 hours. Now, if you're running around or moving around, it's going to be less than 8 hours. But, one of these filters will last you 8 hours. And then you have this mask, which goes over your face, protects your eyes. As you can see, if there's any kind of chemicals in the air or radiation, it's not going to get into your eye and cause some kind of adverse effects on your eyes. It protects your mucous membranes, which is critical for a biological situation. You have to protect your mucous membranes because that's how biological agents spread. So first thing I recommend everybody get is a simple mask for $40. And make sure you fit it well to your face, and make sure you practice with it. The next thing that's also very inexpensive is some potassium iodide tablets. And you can see this is the company is IOSET, and these are also very inexpensive. You can buy them for like $10. What you do is you take one of these tablets here every day. As soon as you find out of any kind of emergency situation, you take one each day. And what this does is it protects your thyroid gland, because your thyroid gland will absorb radioactive iodine, which is a byproduct of any kind of nuclear reaction. So your body will absorb that first before it absorbs natural iodine. So you want to protect your thyroid gland and take some potassium iodide. And like I said, this is really cheap. what you do is you start taking this as soon as you find out that there's some type of an attack. You start taking this right away and you finish the whole thing. So let's say today I found out that there was a nuclear bomb went off over here where I live. I would start taking one of these every day, and I would finish this whole packet here, which is 14 tablets, so 2 weeks worth. And that will keep my iodine saturated with, my thyroid will be saturated with potassium iodide. So this way my thyroid won't absorb radioactive iodine, because what the thyroid gland does is the thyroid gland hoards iodine, because iodine is not a very common mineral. So your thyroid gland will hold it. Any kind of iodine that comes into contact with it will hoard it. So you want to make sure you saturate your thyroid with the non-radioactive iodine when there's a presence of radioactive iodine. So this way your body doesn't absorb the radioactive iodine. So this is another cheap thing you can do if there's any kind of nuclear attack. And then we also have a Geiger. Another thing is EMP bags. An EMP bag will protect your electronics. So if a nuclear weapon goes off, it won't fry any of your critical electronics. You can put your cell phone in here. You can put any kind of critical things that you need. In here, I actually have a Geiger counter, which is a radiation detector. And what this does is it detects radiation around me, and it also calculates how much radiation I've absorbed over a period of time. So this way I can measure how much radiation I've absorbed. So I know if I'm exceeding a threshold that's going to cause cancer or make me sick from radiation. So you can get one of these. This one cost me about $140 US dollars, so it's not cheap. But once you buy it, you have it for life, and you never need to worry about anything again as far as detecting radiation. This will detect any kind of gamma rays, which are the principal type of radiation that is emitted from a nuclear weapon. So this will help you to detect the radiation in your area, after an event of some kind, a nuclear weapon or whatever. A radiological weapon or something like that. And it'll tell you where the safe zones are, so you can see the areas that have high radiation. You obviously don't want to stay too long in those areas, and this will actually have an audible alarm that will go off once the radiation is too high. So it'll let me know that I'm in a danger zone and I need to move away from that area. And I can set that threshold for that alarm with this particular tool that I have. I can set the threshold. So, if I reach a certain threshold, I know that I need to escape from that area. So that handles the nuclear portion. And if we're talking about like a nuclear attack, you also have to understand how a bomb works. Like I mentioned before, you have your blast, you have your thermal radiation, you have your fallout. Thermal radiation is just heat. So you have your blast effects, which is like the dynamite. Then you have your heat, which melts everything. Then you have the radiation, and then you have your EMP, electromagnetic pulse. So I think for most people, unless you live in a downtown area, like if you live in downtown Manhattan or you live in downtown London and you're, right in the center of the city, or in the center of a major nuclear target, like a major city in the West somewhere, Berlin, New York City, Chicago, Los Angeles, unless you're actually in the downtown area, or, you probably don't have to worry about the blast or the heat effects. And, because those are going to be localized to a smaller area. So as long as you're a few miles away from the actual detonation point, you should be pretty much safe from most of the blast and the heat effects. So that's why the best thing to do is if you live in a city, you need to have an evacuation plan. If there's word that there's a missile coming, to your city, usually here in the United States, we get alerts through our cell phones if there's something going on. And that gives us time to prepare. But You want to immediately flee from the city, and that's where having a survival bag will help you. An evacuation bag, which is going to have all the essentials you need to survive. You need to have basics of survival: water, snacks, all these things here. The mask. Your mask is going to come in handy after you evacuate. Your Geiger counter, or your dosimeter. You're going to want to put this in your evacuation kit. And same thing with your tablets here. This is all going to be in your evacuation kit. And um, you want to make sure your evacuation kit is not too heavy. The best thing is to use a basic backpack. So here's an example of my survival kit here. It's a small backpack. Here I have medical stuff here. So something like this that's lightweight. I probably wouldn't go heavier than 10 kilos or 20 pounds in the U.S. You're going to need to be able to run, because if a missile is coming inbound, you only have like 20 or 30 minutes to run away, before that missile hits. So you need to have something light enough where you can run away and get away from the situation. And so you need to make sure your evacuation kit is light enough. And like I said, I prefer a two strap backpack with neutral colors like this, so I can camouflage if I need to hide from dangerous people. A two-strap backpack that has the most security, because you can wear both straps, and some kind of a waist belt too. So you want to fill your evacuation kit with all your essentials that you need. If you have some illnesses and you need medicine that's critical for you, like a diabetic, make sure your evacuation bag has that in there. And like I said, you want to make sure you have your mask with you. But once you get away from the blast radius, which is the area where the blast is going to hit, you don't have to worry anymore about the heat or the blast. Then you're going to have to worry about radiation. And this is where I want to say how you can survive a nuclear bomb, because the radiation that is given off from fallout is not very persistent in the environment, because fallout is just ash, and the ash is not very dense, and so it's not going to hold the radiation very long. So what you need to do is, as soon as you evacuate from the city that you live in, if let's say that they say that the target is New York City and you live in New York City, or if the target is London and you live in London, you need to flee to the countryside, and make sure you get away as quickly as possible from the suspected target area, because that's where the heat and the blast will be unsurvivable. You're not going to be able to really survive. The chances of survival are going to be extremely low if you're close to the detonation point. So you need to get away from the blast radius and from the thermal radiation, so you don't burn yourself. And then usually, in order to do that, you're going to probably need to cover at least 5 to 10 kilometers to get away to a relatively safe area. And that's doable. You can easily run, 5 kilometers in 30 minutes, because that's usually the time it takes for a missile overseas to hit, the US or Europe if it's coming from Iran. So once you run away, you want to find a good shelter area. The best area that I can think of is in the basement of a house or the basement of an apartment building. And if you can't find that, if you're in like a open area where there's like farms or something, then the best thing is to go into like a drainage culvert, or any kind of a canal or something that goes underground, maybe even a sewer. A sewer system can provide a lot of protection from radiation, because there's a lot of concrete and dirt around the sewer, and because the sewer is underground, it will provide the same protection as a nuclear fallout shelter will. So a sewer is a good option. Drainage channels or culverts that go under roads, or any kind of channels, things like that. that go underground, basements of houses, basements of large buildings. As long as the building is not going to collapse on you, and if you're far enough away from the blast, it's safe to go under a tall building. But if you're close to the blast, you don't want to go under a tall building because it will collapse on top of you and the rubble will bury you alive. But if you're far away from the blast enough to where it's not going to loosen the building up and make it fall on you, then the best thing is to go underneath and go into the basement. And the basement is a good area because you have dirt all around you. And, the only area you really need to worry about where radiation will be coming in is from above you, from the windows. If you have any windows or doors that go into the basement, then you're going to need to cover those up with dirt. So you're going to need to grab a shovel and dig out dirt from the surrounding area and make a big pile of dirt on the outside of your windows and doors. And you're going to want to make that dirt 2 feet thick. You're going to want to have 2 feet of dirt. So if you live in the UK, I'm not sure what that translates to. You're probably looking at like 2/3 of a meter or half a meter of dirt. And you're going to want to pile that dirt up on any windows and any doorways that are around your basement. So this way it'll block the radiation from coming in as best as you can. If you can't do that in time, just do the best you can. But you want to seal off those windows, and then you want to also build yourself a very rudimentary shelter in the basement. And the best way to do that is to go into the corner of the basement. And in the corner of the basement, you're going to want to build a temporary shelter around yourself, and you're going to want to do that with household materials, furniture, bricks, any kind of wood that's laying around your basement. If you have any building materials, books are really good because books are dense, and they can block radiation. But the denser the material, the better it is, and the more it's going to block the radiation. I'm not going to get too detailed into the specifics of how thick you need to make it based on what type of material it is, because we could be here, all night talking about it. But you're going to want to basically build yourself a shelter all around you, and it's just like if you were a kid and you made forts, with furniture. Like when I was a kid, me and my friends, we would have sleepovers. And when we had sleepovers, we would put our furniture together and make like little, forts, that we would sleep in. So it's just imagine like you're a kid and you're playing fort, and so you're going to want to pile up furniture all around you, and the furniture can act as the walls and the skeleton of your shelter. And then once you pile up the furniture, your bookshelves, couches, tables, that's going to form the shelter, and that's going to carry the load of any other materials that you add onto that shelter. And then from there, you're going to want to pile up books, bricks, anything dense that you can think of. You could even shovel dirt in from outside and make a mound of dirt around you. Sandbags, cinder blocks, bricks, pieces of wood, firewood. If you have firewood laying around, you can stack up firewood around you. But the most important thing is you want to stack up as much stuff all around you as you can, and you want to seal yourself up over your head and all around you. And because you're going to be in the corner of the basement, you're not going to have to really worry about like one side of the shelter. You're really just going to have to focus on what's above you and what's in front of you and seal that off. Because the basement is going to seal off the back areas and protect you from the radiation, on one side of it. So, you can do that. And, radiation breaks down fairly quickly when it's a fallout shelter. If you're in a fallout shelter, you need to also bring in water and food enough to last you at least a week, because once the fallout starts to settle down into your area, depending on how far away you are from the actual nuclear blast, the fallout is going to take anywhere from a half an hour to 5 hours, or even more to settle down and land in your area, because the wind is going to carry it slowly. So the closer you are, you're going to need to act really quickly before dangerous levels of fallout are going to start accumulating on your house and on the outside ground. Um, and you obviously want to stay away. If you don't have a basement, you want to get as low as possible and as much in the middle of the house as possible. If there's no basement at all, you want to stay away from outside walls, stay away from windows and roofs, because those areas will have accumulated a lot of fallout. Especially if there's an attic in your house, do not go in the attic, because the roof above the attic is going to accumulate all the fallout. It's going to land on the roof, and that radiation is going to penetrate through the roof, because the roof is not thick enough to protect you from the radiation. So you're going to take a high dose of radiation. You're going to accumulate a high dose. So stay away from attics. The best thing is to go down underground into a basement. If you can't do that, go into the middle of your first floor and seal off all the outside areas that radiation could be leaking through. So if you have any windows or doors, pile up dirt around them as best as you can, and then from there build your shelter on the inside of the first floor in the center. Pile up all stuff around you as much as possible, and the more stuff you pile up, and the less open spaces you have, the better off you're going to be in terms of blocking the radiation. You're not going to be able to block all of the radiation, but you can significantly reduce it by 50% to 80%. And that's going to be enough to prevent you from getting sick and having lethal doses of radiation, or, being sick for the rest of your life with cancer. So, make your debris shelter. And that's where, this mask is going to come in handy. The mask is going to come in handy because you're going to need to protect your lungs, so you don't breathe in the fallout, the ashes in the air. Because once you breathe it in, it's going to irradiate your lungs, and you're going to get lung cancer. And this is where the radiation dosimeter is going to come into play, because radiation breaks down by the rule of sevens. I've done a whole series on my channel about nuclear attack survival skills. But basically, the critical things you need to know are the rule of sevens, or the 7-10 rule, and then also the distance. You need to know the 7-10 rule, which is basically that for every factor of 7 in time, you increase from the time of the radiation is created, the radiation strength will decrease by a factor of 10. So just to give you an example, if right now there's radiation outside and there's fallout on top of my roof, the radiation that will be on my roof will be 10 times weaker 7 hours from now. And then another 7 days from now, it will be 100 times weaker. I'm sorry, not 7 days, but 7 hours. And then if you multiply 7 times 7, that's another factor of 7. You're going to have 49 hours, which is 2 days. So after 2 days, the radiation will be 100 times less. And then if you go another factor of 7, you're going to be looking at 7 times 49. So you're looking at 2 weeks. The radiation will be 1,000 times weaker. So after 7 hours, the radiation will be 10 times weaker. It'll break down 10 times by a factor of 10. After 2 days, it's going to be, or 49 hours, it's going to be 100 times less strong. And then after 2 weeks, it's going to be roughly 1,000 times less. So what's the lesson to learn here? And this is what I started in the beginning of the video. I mentioned that nuclear attacks are survivable. And the reason why is that as long as you're not in the blast radius, which is where all the blast and the heat will be, the fallout, the radiation doesn't stick around that long. So the critical thing is surviving the first 2 days to 2 weeks. So you need to build yourself that shelter, and it has to be adequate enough to protect you from the radiation for a period of 2 days to 2 weeks. Because after 2 days to 2 weeks, the radiation will subside to the point where it will be safe enough to go out of your shelter. But if you don't take any precautions and you decide to just, try to wing it, um, you're not gonna make it. So you need to get away from the detonation point. You need to find suitable shelter. Basement of a building is the best. If you can't, then like I said, anything underground is good, because the ground will protect you naturally from the radiation. Um, if you can find a bank and go into a bank vault, that's a good option too, because bank vaults have a lot of steel. If you can go into a storm drain or some type of sewer, that can work very well too. Because you have the sewer and it's the ground above you. Sewers are usually like a few feet underground. So, that few feet of soil will protect you from a lot of the radiation. And like I said, I'm not going to go into specifics, but 2 feet of soil will make a huge difference in how much radiation is passing through. Um, so, and then once you find your shelter area, you're going to want to build yourself that little improvised shelter. And before you seal yourself off in it, bring in water and bring in food, and maybe sanitation, maybe like a bucket that you can use to go to the bathroom, because you're going to have to stay in there at least 2 days, ideally at least a week, before you should come out and use your counter to check if the radiation has dropped down to safe levels. So what you need to do is bring water, bring food into your shelter. Bring anything else that you think you would need, medicines if you have some kind of illness and you're dependent on medicine. Um, bring it all into your shelter. Bring some way of excreting your waste, like a bucket is great, because you can fill up the bucket with urine or feces, and after a few days, the bucket will fill up, and then you can go outside and dump it out. And it's okay for you to leave your shelter in quick bursts if you have to go outside, to check on something, to eliminate waste, whatever. But you have to make sure you don't get any of the fallout debris on top of your clothing, because if you bring that back inside to your shelter, it's going to contaminate your shelter, and your shelter will be useless. So I would advise that you don't go out of your shelter once you lock yourself in. If you do have to go out of your shelter, then you want to put some kind of a poncho on top of yourself, or some type of you can even use a plastic bag, garbage bag. You can cut a hole, put a garbage bag over you. So this way, if any debris lands on you, you can just take the garbage bag off and go back into your shelter, and you don't have to worry about bringing in radioactive debris or fallout. But stay inside your shelter and wait it out. And you're going to have to wait a few days. But once you wait a few days, the radiation will subside to lower levels. And then at that point, you can go out and, try to figure out if there's other survivors in the area. See if there's any rescue parties that are out looking for people in your area. Try to connect with emergency responders, which are probably going to be canvassing all the different neighborhoods. It's going to take them a while to canvass every single neighborhood. So you need to be ready to, survive by yourself in the shelter at least a few days. And then beyond that, you're going to need to be able to survive up to 2 to 3 weeks on your own with little outside help. So I kind of wanted to do this quick video, and like I said, based on the rule of the 7-10 rule, it is survivable. A nuclear attack is survivable. You just have to keep these things in the back of your head, that I mentioned. I'm pouring out all my knowledge to you guys, because I'm trying to help you guys learn something. and I hope you find it useful. And just remember the three P's: prepare, practice, and persevere. And take care. God bless, and I'll see you soon.